And not with the interest of making a film about it. I was just interested as a citizen, because at that time, the voice of Woodward Bernstein was not to be heard of at all. It was all about Nixon. Nixon controlled the universe at that time politically.
At 88, Robert Redford is finally lifting the curtain on a secret he kept for decades. Smooth, gracious, and famously composed on screen, Redford always seemed above the Hollywood fray. But even the most unflappable star has limits. Beneath that golden boy image, there were a few names he kept locked away. Actors who, for all their talent, pushed him too far. This is Redford like you've never seen him before. Unfiltered, unsparing, and ready to name the 7 co-stars who made his life miserable. Get ready. These stories will change the way you look at some of Hollywood's most celebrated faces. 7. Tom Cruise. Tom Cruise is one of the most recognizable and enduring stars in the history of Hollywood. Rising to fame in the early 1980s with breakout roles in movies like Risky Business and Top Gun, Cruise quickly became synonymous with the term movie star. Known for his charm, intensity, and work ethic, Cruise built a career that few actors can match, delivering iconic performances across a diverse range of genres. From Rain Man and Born on the 4th of July to his later work in Magnolia and Collateral, Cruise proved that he could take on serious, challenging material as easily as he could light up a summer blockbuster. Audiences worldwide responded to his energy and commitment, making him a household name and one of the most bankable stars for decades. Cruise's talent wasn't just in front of the camera. Throughout his career, he also took on producing responsibilities and built creative partnerships that allowed him to shape projects to his liking. Franchise filmmaking became a major part of Cruise's legacy, especially with the Mission: Impossible series, where he not only plays the lead, but also oversees creative decisions and performs many of his own stunts. Known for pushing himself physically and emotionally, Cruise has famously learned to do everything from helicopter piloting to scaling skyscrapers to bring authenticity to his roles. Even as the cinematic landscape has shifted in recent years, with the rise of streaming and changing audience habits, Cruise has remained a star committed to the theatrical experience. His work in Top Gun: Maverick is a testament to his ongoing belief that big, ambitious filmmaking deserves to be seen on the largest screen possible.
Tom Cruise bringing the trailer with him to Comic-Con in San Diego, where, as he pointed out, parts of the first Top Gun were filmed.
Besides the overwhelming success he has received and an enormous cultural footprint, Cruise has equally faced quite some controversies, as well as challenges along the way. Beyond the screen, his overt support of the Church of Scientology and the way he conducts himself during interview times, at times, overshadow much of his work. Some colleagues have referred to him as so driven that he tends to perfectionism, which makes working with him very tough. According to reports from Robert Redford in the material you sent, their partnership on Lions for Lambs was particularly strained. Redford described Cruise as more concerned with optics, control, and brand image than with the story's emotional truth. The film's producer, Cruise, was said to have publicists and imagery consultants during meetings and was very much involved in aspects such as scene changes and marketing. Redford, who would rather cherish patience and the subtle craftsmanship involved in filmmaking, thought that he and Cruise were headed toward different objectives and ways of thinking. This made the experience sour for Redford working with Cruise again. This further established that Cruise considers filmmaking more of a strategic business than an artistic collaboration. Yet, blindly forward, the Cruise's celebration and creative ambition are moving. Indeed, even more than ever. Although the two never really saw eye to eye, he has just recently made choices that play to his singular idea of what filmmaking can be: bold, epic, and unapologetic mainstream. His approach, brimming with intensity, may irk some peers, but audiences across the globe still react to the spectacle and excitement that Cruise brings to the cinema. There is a reason why his films often behave like events. His performances are such deeply committed ones, because his career is as permanent as that. Whether he is taking the world's tallest towers for Mission Impossible or chasing a heartfelt role in a serious drama, he is simply putting full throttle into his work. For all the tension he might cause off-screen, what is most valuable to him is a bigger-than-life entertainment philosophy that may rub some of his collaborators the wrong way, but certainly strikes a chord with millions of moviegoers. And just like Cruz, another Hollywood icon was stirring up tension behind the scenes. 6. Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman is one of Hollywood's most celebrated and transformative actors, with a career that spans over 6 decades. Rising to prominence in the late 1960s with The Graduate, Hoffman became an emblem of a new kind of leading man, intelligent, neurotic, and often unpredictable. A stark contrast to the traditional tough guy stars that dominated Hollywood before him. Throughout his career, Hoffman earned numerous accolades, including 2 Academy Awards for his unforgettable performances in Kramer vs. Kramer and Rain Man. Critics and audiences alike have often cited Hoffman's unparalleled commitment to his craft, his obsessive attention to detail, and his deep emotional range as reasons why his performances remain so memorable. Unlike actors who relied purely on charm or physicality, Hoffman was known for disappearing into his roles, crafting characters that felt painfully real, whether they were fragile, resolute, or quietly rebellious. Yet, Hoffman's career was not without its difficulties, especially when it came to his working relationships with other actors and directors. Robert Redford, his co-star in All the President's Men, has famously hinted at the friction between their contrasting approaches to filmmaking. Redford described himself as a disciplined, collaborative actor, someone who arrived prepared and hoped to maintain a steady rhythm on set. Hoffman, by contrast, was known to shake up that rhythm, improvising lines, subtly repositioning himself on screen, or testing multiple deliveries of the same scene in unpredictable ways. Redford respected Hoffman's immense talent, but found these habits exhausting. What began as a promising partnership ultimately became a test of patience for Redford, who felt that Hoffman's improvisations disrupted the carefully constructed flow of the scenes. Redford once told a close friend that while he would never deny Hoffman's brilliance, their working styles had created tension and discomfort that made further collaboration undesirable. That conflict with Redford, the man, was typical of Hoffman's career. The actor pushed himself and other people to the limits. Stories are told on almost every set about the intensity of Hoffman. Joint directors and fellow actors admired him because he was always in search of the authentic, but they dreaded his unpredictable methods and perfectionism sometimes. On the set of Tootsie, for instance, Hoffman rewrote the dialogue at the last minute, arguing back and forth with co-stars, along with Sidney Pollack, the director. With that obsession for making realistic, memorable, and totally conceived characters, Hoffman's legacy as one of America's great actors was matched by the fact that it felt like an endurance test to work with him. That was the ultimate reason why Redford decided never to act with Hoffman again. Even if All the President's Men is possibly the most classic example of film and the touchstone of 1970s filmmaking, the two actors never quite connected on a personal or creative level for very long. Of course, beyond these tensions on set are great artistic achievements in Hoffman's career. From the raw anguish in Midnight Cowboy to heart-pulling vulnerability in Kramer vs. Kramer, Hoffman fashioned many of the greatest characters in American cinema. Redford would then say that Hoffman is one of the great forces of talent in the industry, even though there was no desire for a second go-around. In his wake are examples of rawness and risk-taking, ones who have always challenged conventions. Even after the tensions with Redford, in all fairness, Hoffman's genius remains an enormous light that has illumined a whole generation of actors. At this point, one thing becomes clear. His legacy contains the heart and spirit of an unlikely journey, one in which great care and commitment were emphasized, further serving to confirm that lasting art can emerge from very complicated and imperfect partnerships. 5. Gene Hackman. Gene Hackman is one of the most respected actors of his generation, celebrated for his versatility, intensity, and commanding screen presence. From his breakthrough performance as Buck Barrow in Bonnie and Clyde, to his Academy Award-winning roles in The French Connection and Unforgiven, Hackman built a career that spanned decades and crossed countless genres. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, he became a familiar face in American cinema, often playing tough, morally complex characters who could explode with raw energy or smolder with quiet intensity. Hackman was a consummate professional on set, bringing a fierce commitment to every role, no matter the size of the part or the scope of the film. Audiences and critics alike admired him for his authenticity and skill, recognizing that when Hackman was on screen, you could never quite predict what might happen next. Yet, for all his brilliance as a performer, Hackman was also known for his uncompromising style and intensity on set, qualities that sometimes created friction with his co-stars. Robert Redford, who worked alongside Hackman on Downhill Racer, described Hackman as a kind of sledgehammer in a violin shop, someone whose talent was undeniable, but who often failed to modulate his forcefulness when subtlety was required.
Patriot, Mr. Rohr. What with their blatant disregard for the people's right to bear arms, the Second Amendment?
Redford respected Hackman's craft and drive, but grew increasingly frustrated by his volatile behavior, especially during a tense production moment where Hackman clashed with the crew over a lighting setup and refused to leave his trailer for an hour. Redford eventually had to confront Hackman directly, telling him that filmmaking was a team effort and urging him to put the larger picture ahead of his personal frustrations. Hackman complied, but the experience left a lasting impression. That kind of intensity wasn't exclusive to Hackman's with Redford. They had other colleagues who experienced that fiery commitment on other sets. Throughout his career, Hackman was famous for his quick temper and cutting remarks, especially when a scene was mishandled in his opinion. He was appreciated by directors because he would not stay silent, but thus they had to reckon with the unpredictable waves of emotions that followed. As he very seldom indulged in the sort of politicking or self-promotion common in Hollywood, he would be less understood as a serious actor first and a movie star second. Hackman is not interested in running games or pretending. The work itself mattered to Hackman the most, and that commitment sometimes meant the making of permanent friendships or smooth sets. Redford himself admitted this, adding that Hackman was probably one of the most disciplined actors he had ever watched, but was one of the hardest personalities he had ever tried to work with professionally. Thus, even with those troubles, Hackman still stands as a very unsparing legacy in the field of acting. There was a rumor mill that swarmed with tales of his fierce and prickly working methods, but in the process, his performances always reached across the generations. The sheer rich textures of great shows such as Hoosiers, The Conversation, and Crimson Tide confirmed the considerable range of Hackman as an actor. His ability to be cast in parts so much like and so much not unlike himself that they were often as thorny and unpredictable as he itself was. Hackman completely quit the Hollywood spotlight after retiring from acting in his early 2000s and chose the alternative of writing novels and having a quiet life. So good had Redford been at saying he would collaborate with Hackman again. Even Redford never denied the energy Hackman brought to his roles. Gene Hackman will always be thought of as a powerfully memorable presence on screen, an actor who loved to hate by many colleagues or not, was altogether impossible to ignore. And just as Hackman left his mark with a force, this next formidable talent was making waves of her own. 4. Faye Dunaway. Faye Dunaway is one of the most iconic actresses in Hollywood history, known for her fierce intensity, commanding presence, and remarkable talent. Rising to prominence in the late 1960s with her breakout performance in Bonnie and Clyde, Dunaway captivated audiences with her magnetic screen presence and sharp, nuanced portrayals of complex women. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, she became a defining figure of New Hollywood, earning critical praise for roles in Chinatown, Network, and 3 Days of the Condor. Dunaway had a gift for balancing glamour with grit, bringing a fierce intelligence to every character she embodied. Whether she was playing an ambitious television executive or a determined outlaw, she invested herself completely in the part, earning the respect of her peers and cementing her status as one of the most formidable actresses of her era. Yet despite her immense talent, Dunaway was also known for her uncompromising, perfectionist style on set, which sometimes created tension with directors, co-stars, and crew. Robert Redford, who co-starred with Dunaway in 3 Days of the Condor, experienced these tensions firsthand. Redford was known for his measured, disciplined approach to filmmaking, showing up prepared, hitting his marks, and trusting his collaborators to do their jobs. Dunaway, on the other hand, often pushed the creative process to its limits. Insiders on the set described her as highly particular and deeply protective of her work. Dunaway was known to review dailies, request multiple takes, and call for changes to lighting or staging long after they had been set. Redford, who believed that filmmaking was best accomplished through trust and momentum, grew increasingly frustrated with her meticulous demands. What could have been a smooth production became an exhausting negotiation, and Redford eventually began to feel that their collaboration was more about control than creativity. On one occasion, tension exploded during a heated closed-door meeting with director Sidney Pollack. Dunaway was questioning the motivation of her character in a pivotal scene. Redford had kept most of his frustrations to himself, but finally, he spoke up, telling Dunaway it was a thriller, not a finely drawn character study, and the three of them needed to move on. It was said that He-Room fell silent after the confrontation. Dunaway, ever the trooper, didn't shy away. She came on set the next day, poised and professional, but witnesses to the blow-up agreed that the dynamic had changed. Redford continued to work with her for the duration of the shoot, but he never really warmed up to her afterward. Even years later, when the film was hailed as one of the most tense and thrilling political dramas of its time, he avoided speaking much about their collaboration. Nonetheless, the tides in Dunaway's professional life could never make her career speak in her absence. It was her living testimony that throughout her decades of association with Hollywood, she earned a place as one true force-of-nature actress whose craft made some of the most unforgettable performances of her generation. Even if her working style could at times be difficult to navigate by co-stars like Redford, one couldn't deny the rare quality of her intensity, and most importantly, the realness roles she had played. Whether it is the unforgettable expression in her face at the end of Chinatown, or the fiery monologue that earned her an Oscar in Network, there really is something electric about her screen presence. Redford would later call her unforgettable, the very word to characterize her impact on the screen and on those who had to work with her, those who faced the challenge and honor of working alongside such a star. 3. James Woods. James Woods is one of Hollywood's most distinctive and outspoken actors, known for his intense energy, sharp intellect, and formidable presence. Breaking into the mainstream in the 1980s with films like Videodrome and Once Upon a Time in America, Woods quickly became associated with characters who were clever, complex, and often morally ambiguous. Throughout his career, he cultivated a reputation as someone who could infuse any scene with unpredictable electricity, shifting from charm to menace with remarkable ease. Audiences admired Woods for his skill at playing characters who lived on the edge, his roles often blurring the lines between hero and villain, sympathetic and dangerous. That capacity for complexity allowed him to stand out even among Hollywood's most talented actors, and earned him a pair of Academy Award nominations for Salvador and Ghosts of Mississippi, cementing his place as one of the most provocative performers of his generation. Yet that same intensity that made Woods so riveting on screen could also make him a challenging collaborator. Robert Redford's experiences with Woods offer a telling example. Redford, known for his calm, measured style and collaborative ethos, found himself at odds with Woods's more confrontational and politically charged personality during casting sessions for several Redford-directed projects. Redford reportedly walked out of one audition after Woods shifted from performing a scene to debating the political undercurrents of the story, turning a simple read into a contentious exchange about history and ideology. Redford later told colleagues that Woods was someone who brought chaos to places that needed quiet, describing him as a brilliant actor who was more interested in dominating a room than working as part of a creative team. Despite Redford's admiration for Woods's craft, these encounters ensured that they would never collaborate professionally. The friction was political, but not only political. Redford was the actor's actor-director, who was more concerned with the safety and discipline of his set, so that everyone was free to do their best work. Woods, on the other hand, was all about the energy and confrontation, constantly holding an impassioned view of his character, which tended to unnerve the more congenial with whom he was working. As far as Redford was concerned, telling a story required time and gentleness, but Woods viewed every part as a battlefield, eager to assert his point of view and test the responses of those around him. Contrasting those gentle ways, the refined ways in which Redford sought to carve out a career were simply not going to fit. Essentially, the two men were just so different that they could not work together. Woods would set fire to a role, but meanwhile, he would extinguish any dull, constant tempo that Redford's set would typically maintain. Woods continued without any direct cooperation to carve for himself a career, long and varied, between film, television, and stage. Even though he was carrying on behind the lines of a stage, the turbulence of controversy followed him off-screen, and his loud anti-establishment utterances overshadowed his acting. His reputation as a fearless and talented performer never entirely dimmed. Redford, for his part, never went beyond terse words spoken in privacy when it came to denigrating Woods. It was a quiet, deliberate kind of distancing simple personal and professional choices of setting a line without making a spectacle out of it. Woods and Redford never had any public conversations regarding the differences between them, nor was there any substantial feud. Redford's experience with Woods, though, shows how even among celebrated actors, personal styles can clash, and greatly talented people are forever left on opposite sides of the process of filmmaking. 2. Robert Duval. Robert Duval is one of the most revered actors of his generation, a consummate craftsman who built his career on quiet intensity, authenticity, and deep commitment to character. Throughout decades of acclaimed performances, Duval displayed an unparalleled ability to inhabit diverse roles with subtlety and depth, from his breakthrough as Boo Radley to his iconic turn as Tom Hagen in The Godfather, and his Oscar-winning performance as country singer Max Sledge in Tender Mercies. Audiences and critics alike celebrated Duval for his naturalism, his carefully calibrated emotional range, and the sense of lived-in realism he brought to every character. Even when playing larger-than-life figures like Lieutenant Colonel Kilgore in Apocalypse Now, Duval never let bombast overpower the humanity at the core of his performances. His work earned him awards, accolades, and the lasting respect of his peers. Yet despite his status as one of Hollywood's most accomplished actors, Duval was not always an easy collaborator. Robert Redford's experience working with Duval on The Natural revealed some of these tensions. Redford, a disciplined actor and director who approached filmmaking with measured focus and careful preparation, was taken aback by Duval's more instinctive and unpredictable process. Redford believed that a successful scene required precise planning, where every beat was emotionally calibrated to serve the larger story. Duval, however, had a very different philosophy. He famously valued spontaneity, often preferring to throw himself into a take without much rehearsal. Redford respected Duval's brilliance as a performer, but this clash in working styles created an undercurrent of friction on set. The friction had come to a boiling point in one particularly dramatic scene, and Redford and Duval had to shoot together. Redford wanted Duval to execute the confrontation the way he wanted, according to his design. Duval, ever the unorthodox one, made last-minute changes in his lines and rhythm, undermining the emotional arc that Redford had so closely woven together. What ensued was an uncomfortable exchange. Redford held that this was an ensemble piece dependent upon shared discipline. Duval maintained that authenticity is king above all. The crew, standing nearby, witnessed this heated firestorm because both actors were of the highest caliber, but with very different instincts. Redford would go on to say that Duval was a man who played jazz when a symphony was called for, and that creative tension made it very difficult for both of them to work together. Not once did Redford fail to recognize the prowess of Duval. Between them, he retains a high regard for Duval's skill as an actor and his dedication to digging at the core of a character, even as their wanderings too far afield after the natural. His flourishing career paved the way for greater honors in the successive years and for earning a place as one of the great actors of the United States in the annals of history. Redford, happily, wanted their collaboration to remain that way, a one-off experience. In later interviews, he noted that they had made a powerful film together, one that captured something deep about American myth and sports, but he pointedly added that their personal and creative approaches were just too different to try again. Duval rarely commented on their work dynamic, preferring to focus on the next role that appealed to him, in typical fashion of his independent streak. Not only did they craft a great movie together, but they also learned that sometimes even the best pairings work better apart. Nevertheless, in the realm of professional success and accomplishment, there is in Duval a lively and rich private life, developed far away from Hollywood. He dances tango and rides horses, and with hunting, retreating to his farm in rural Virginia, he has found peace, quietness, and solace with nature and the discipline of husbanding horses. Such a lifestyle parallels with Duval's authenticity and thoughtfulness as an actor, helping him keep his eye on the essential things that matter to him as an artist and as a person. Balancing an actor's life with those pursuits, Duval is able to channel a healthy share of artful living along with a personal identity that continues to take him through his worthy career on his own terms. And just when you thought the tension couldn't run any deeper, Redford's most surprising revelations come from his #1 pick, a name you'll never see the same way again. 1. Paul Newman. Paul Newman is one of the most enduring icons in Hollywood history, an actor whose talent, charm, and charisma captivated audiences for over 5 decades. Rising to prominence in the 1950s and 60s with landmark performances in Cat on a Hot Tin Roof, Cool Hand Luke, and The Hustler, Newman quickly established himself as more than just a heartthrob. He was a serious actor with an instinctive ability to portray characters of depth and complexity. Known for his piercing blue eyes and self-effacing humor, Newman could inhabit roles that were heroic, rebellious, or vulnerable, often all at once. His work earned him critical acclaim and an Oscar for his performance in The Color of Money, cementing his status as one of the most respected actors of his generation. Newman is also remembered for his famous on-screen partnership with Robert Redford, a dynamic that began with the enormously successful Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid, and continued with The Sting. Audiences loved the chemistry between these two actors. Newman's breezy, confident charm complemented Redford's quieter intensity perfectly. They became Hollywood's most iconic on-screen duo, epitomizing friendship, humor, and a sense of effortless cool. What set Newman apart was his generosity as a scene partner. Even as a superstar in his own right, he was comfortable sharing the spotlight and elevating Redford's presence alongside his own. Off-screen, too, they appeared to enjoy a warm camaraderie that fueled public perception of them as close friends, not just colleagues. Yet, as enduring as that image was for fans and journalists, Redford would eventually describe the working relationship with Newman as more complicated. Redford acknowledged Newman's immense talent and acknowledged that they created two cinematic masterpieces together. However, Redford also hinted at a more guarded, competitive dynamic during the making of The Sting, where Newman's growing interest in producing and exerting creative control created tension. Redford confided to those close to him that as Newman became more involved in decisions off-screen, he felt a subtle shift. What had once been an easy, collaborative friendship began to feel more like a careful chess game between two strong personalities. Redford never denied Newman's magnetism and skill, but he also admitted that working with him became increasingly challenging as they moved deeper into their careers. These uncontrollable complexities did not go up to public quarreling or open argumentation, which perhaps required a display of politeness and respect on the part of the actors. Even after years of their not working together, the two would hear one another's praises on talk shows and other public appearances. The influence of the easygoing character of Newman, whose single gaze could send spirits shrieking into the night, would render anyone speechless. But secretly, Newman would point out to Redford that the latter kept himself somewhat aloof, portraying himself as free and open, yet maintaining tight patency on his works and relations. Newman had a kind of magic in terms of his charisma that could pull people close, yet subtly keep them at an arm's length. Redford respected that side of Newman as a business person and as an artist, but he could also see its limits in terms of the more profound personal connection. Paul Newman's legacy goes far beyond acting. He was a philanthropist and entrepreneur, with his company Newman's Own donating $10 million to charity. Newman was also a talented race car driver, a civil rights advocate, and a deeply private person. Though his friendship with Robert Redford had its limits, Redford never questioned Newman's sincerity or generosity. Their on-screen chemistry remains iconic, continuing to captivate audiences for generations. And that's the story. 7 surprising names you probably never expected. If you enjoyed this, hit that like button, drop a comment telling us which one shocked you most, and subscribe for more behind-the-scenes reveals. Don't forget to click on the next video on your screen. You won't want to miss what's coming up next.